So today we are going to be doing a very different type of video for my channel. This video idea came to me quite a few months ago because I have recently been back on my reading game. I've always been on and off with reading. You know, there are some times in my life where I'm all about the reading. I want to read all the new novels, and then there are some times that I'm like, I just don't have time for that. But especially when the pandemic hit in early 2020, I really started gravitating towards reading. It was just the perfect escape for me, and just a few months before that, I had actually invested in a Kindle, which I should have grabbed for this video. Let me go get it. Okay, we're back. Grabbed my Kindle. This is my reading buddy. Once I dived back into reading so frequently, I quickly realized this was the best investment I ever made. I understand the argument of people saying they like a physical book. Honestly, I always loved a physical book too, but what a Kindle can do for you is just life-changing. If you're a reader, that is. It's not that serious, but if you're a reader, I mean, this thing saves so much space. It's so much more practical to read books in literally any situation. You don't need good background light. You don't need a good reading light. You can store thousands of books essentially on this at any given time. So if you're reading a book that is boring you, you don't have to worry about taking two with you or anything like that. You just have your entire library on here. It's the most convenient thing ever. We all know that in today's day and age, nothing can quite sell you on items like TikTok. And recently, book talk has been very, very big. There have been so many, especially young adult novels that have gotten super, super popular on TikTok. And the popularity of these books has transcended from the internet into real life. If you guys walk into any physical bookstore, you will more than likely see a book talk or a popular on social media type table or section. This video is going to be diving into 8 different books that got very, very popular on TikTok, that everybody raves about, that everybody says you have to read. They're the best reads of life. I read them all, and I am going to be going through them one by one, telling you guys my personal opinions on them. Also, if you guys enjoy this video, I would appreciate it so much if you guys would thumbs it up or comment down below. Any engagement you guys can make with my content really, really helps my videos and my channel overall. So the first book we're going to be chatting about is called Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I'm starting off hot in this video because to me, this book, 5 stars across the board. If you guys like kind of creepy, mystery, thrillery type books, and books that kind of keep you on the edge of your seat guessing what the heck is going on, you guys will love this book. So this book follows a girl named Jules. She's kind of in a rough predicament and then ends up moving into this really, really bougie luxe apartment complex called the Bartholomew. She's actually hired to work there as a house sitter, and this is a very kind of exclusive underground, like nobody really knows what goes on in these apartments because only the tip top, richest of rich, most exclusive people can even afford to live there. But she kind of gets her foot in the door by becoming a house sitter, and then all this creepy stuff starts happening. There's all these weird rules in the apartment building, like you can't bring any visitors in. She's not allowed to spend any nights away from the apartment. It's just like a whole creepy thing. My favorite thing about this book was that the story was fully wrapped up by the end. I also really enjoyed this book because it made sense, at least to me. It made sense all the way through. It was actually a very thought-provoking story, at least to me. Fully enjoyed it, 5 stars. By the way, as I go through these books, I'm not gonna be giving any major spoilers. I'll just do very brief synopsis from my own perspective, and obviously I'm not gonna, you know, drop any big bombshells here because I want you guys to be able to read the books and fully enjoy them for what they are without me totally ruining it. Probably the most popular author on TikTok across the board has to be Colleen Hoover. I don't think anybody can argue with me on this. Colleen Hoover books just rock TikTok. And I think her most popular book is It Ends With Us. This is the first in a 2-book series, I guess. This was supposed to be, as far as I understand, just a single novel. And then because of the popularity of it, she expanded the storyline and continued with the second book, which is called It Starts With Us. So we're gonna talk about both of them. It Ends With Us, to me, 5-star read. I thought it was great. I think if you know what you're getting into, you will fully enjoy it. The story is basically about a girl named Lily, and she moved to Boston. I believe it was the night of her father's funeral. She runs into a man named Ryle Kincaid. Some of the names in Colleen Hoover's books are just so strange. But anyways, she runs into Ryle and they kind of hit it off. And so the primary story is about Lily and Ryle, and then intermediately throughout the book, Lily is kind of flashbacking to a moment in her high school, I believe. She was really good about keeping journals, and there was of course a high school love in her past. And as you would expect, it's just kind of a natural, just like love story with one woman, two men, what all goes down. What I wasn't expecting in this book, and I will go ahead and put a trigger warning out here immediately, is there is a lot of DA, domestic, I don't know what we can say here on YouTube, but there's a lot of not just references to that topic, but it really goes into detail in certain situations too. Just want to make sure you guys are prepared with that going in, because it is a really heavy read. But to me, it was a really good read. Very easy to read. It was really enjoyable. I looked forward to picking up the book every single night. It was really beautiful, even reading the author's note towards the end of the book and how Colleen Hoover was just describing her inspiration behind the book. I thought it was really lovely. It was a really well-written book, and there was a lot of emotion in it. I loved it, 5 stars. Now with the second book in this little 2-book series, which is called It Starts With Us, it's an immediate continuation from the first book. So definitely read It Ends With Us first, then move on to It Starts With Us if you want to. It Starts With Us, to me, I gave it a 4-star. It was a little bit more slow moving. It was a little bit more predictable in my opinion. And while you were able to dive into all of the characters and their personalities and their backgrounds and stuff even more, again, heavy topics discussed, described, etc. Be prepared for that. But if you make it through the first book, the second book will be no problem. And overall, I would say it was a 4-star read for me. The next book I want to chat about, which I see all the time promoted on all of the like mystery thriller book recommendations lists, is The Silent Patient. Now this was the first book I read out of all of the books I'm about to chat about. So I'm gonna be honest, my memory on this one is a little bit wishy-washy. However, I did rate it a 5-star. So I did thoroughly enjoy it. I had to read a summary to kind of brush up on the facts on this book, but basically it's about a woman named Alicia? I'm not really sure how you say it. We'll just say Alicia. She's a famous painter. She's married to a really famous fashion photographer. It seems like her life is going amazing. They're both really, really successful. And then one day her husband, Gabriel, comes home and she ends up shooting him in the face 5 times. After that, she doesn't speak a word. She ends up going to the Grove, which I believe is a psychiatric facility for the criminally insane, basically. And she stays there and doesn't say anything. There's a psychotherapist that comes and sees her regularly named Theo. He really wants to get answers as to why she shot her husband, obviously, and what the whole situation is, you know, why she's not speaking about it or speaking at all. And so she is essentially the silent patient. Like I said, to be honest, I don't really remember the details about this book, and to be honest, I don't even remember how it ends. So that's making me think maybe it didn't stick in my head as good as it should have. Maybe I'll reread this book soon, because I do remember fully enjoying it, and I remember liking the ending too. As we continue going through this video, I want to make it very clear that I am a big ending person. If the ending isn't good, if it leaves you on an unnecessary cliffhanger with no continuous book, you know, like it's not one in a series, it's just like a single book and it just doesn't end good, or if the ending doesn't make sense, or it feels like it was just pulled out of thin air, I will not give it a good rating. I'm a big ending person with movies, with books, with like anything. I need a good ending. The next book, which I think is right behind Colleen Hoover, it ends with us in terms of popularity, at least I see it all the time, is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've never read a book quite like it, but I think Taylor Jenkins Reid is good at doing books like this. It's written so realistically that you almost believe these people are real. It's not written in a way that it's obvious it's a fictional novel. You almost feel like you're reading a real life thing. It's hard to explain, but if you read the book, I think you'll understand what I mean. Basically, this book is about a super popular, very classic Hollywood actress, Evelyn Hugo. She's one of those actresses that has been around for so many decades. She gained super mass popularity and now she's older. And because she was one of those classic Hollywood actresses, like back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, she was one of those actresses that you never really knew too much about her. You obviously knew about her work and everything like that, but anything that was published about her, that was published in the press or in magazines, you never knew if it was real info or if it was just, you know, to sell tabloids. So people always had these ideas about her life or conspiracies in their head about what she's actually like, but nobody really knew until she decided to do a super exclusive interview with a girl named Monique Grant. Now Monique, while she is like a magazine reporter, she's super unknown. Like nobody knows who this is. So everybody was really shocked when Evelyn decided to use her, and not just decided, but was really insistent that she only wanted Monique to do her interview, and she wanted her to have all the exclusive content and all of the exclusive insight into her life. Obviously, as the book title states, she was married 7 times, so she goes through her entire life with all these different husbands and her rise to fame and all the chaos and troubles that kind of created. Like I said, the way this book was written, you almost feel like Evelyn Hugo is a real person. You almost feel like this is a real Hollywood celebrity, Hollywood starlet that actually existed, and she doesn't, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's just so well written and you really get into the mind and the story, and it's very engaging. I fully enjoyed this book. To me, another 5-star book. Have I given any of these books less than a 5 star so far? I don't think so. I'm sorry, but these are all bangers, you guys. Another Colleen Hoover book we're gonna chat about. I think this is probably her 2nd most popular book, and that one is Verity. I rate this a solid 4-star book. This book is about a struggling writer named Lowen Ashley. Basically, she got the job of a lifetime by being hired as a writer to finish a series of books that was a really successful series from another writer. The other writer was named Verity Crawford. Verity was hurt in an accident and wasn't able to finish the series. So to not disappoint, you know, the fans, Verity's husband, Jeremy, decided to hire Lowen to finish the series. And in order to do that, he told her to basically come to their house, stay there, dig through Verity's, you know, notes on the series and go through her office and gain as much insight as she can into these characters and into the novel, so that way she can, you know, finish the series well. What Lowen doesn't expect to find in Verity's office is a journal. Verity detailed her life, parts of her life, like when she met Jeremy, when she had her kids, all of these big moments in her life, and the journal entries were vulgar and crude, to say the least. So as Lowen is reading the basically inner thoughts of Verity throughout her journey of life, Lowen is getting a lot of insight into who Verity was. This book definitely had some twists and turns. There were a couple moments where I was just sort of confused as to what was going on, but I will say by the end of the book, all the confusion got cleared up. This was a book that I do remember the ending. I remember it really clearly because it did take me by shock. It was a good ending, I'll tell you guys that. And all the way through, the book was pretty good. There were just a couple moments that I was a little bit like, what are we doing? But by the end, I was satisfied. I was pleased. Like I said, solid 4-star. And then the final 2 books I wanted to chat about are actually 2 fantasy series. Now, the first series I actually haven't finished, but I wanted to go ahead and chat about at least the first book that I did read all the way through. So the first series we're gonna chat about is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This series is so hyped up, you guys. I want to preface this by saying I understand that with fantasy series, especially like long-winded series, it takes a while to build the world. I understand, because you really need to dive into the different characters, the different potential plot lines, and especially when it's something fantasy, it's not easily digestible, if that makes sense. You know, like these are all new beings. They're not human, you know? It's a fantasy world, so you have to build that whole fantasy world out. I understand that. However, out of 5 books, I expect at least by the end of the first book for not only that fantasy world to be pretty much fleshed out, but at the very least for me to be invested in the characters and in the plot line and in the various storylines going on. This book did not do that for me. I'm gonna be totally honest. I barely made it through this book. I struggled so hard. Every night I like forced myself to try to finish at least 1 to 2 chapters of this book, but I barely made it, you guys. The book didn't even remotely start to pick up in plotline until about 60% of the way through, and even then I was kind of struggling. Let me tell you kind of what it's about. So basically it's about a 19-year-old huntress. Her name is Feyre, I think. But basically, Feyre is out in the woods. She's a human. She's a mortal in the mortal lands. Her and her family, which is her dad and her 2 sisters, they're really, really poor. They're barely making it. So she's out in the forest hunting to try to bring home food for them. While she's out in the woods, she ends up killing a wolf. And because she ended up killing the wolf, there was basically some repercussions where she had to pay that debt back to the magical land or the mystical land. That land they call Prithian. Basically, to pay her debt, she ends up getting dragged to the mystical, magical land and ends up having to live there. I couldn't even imagine what some of these creatures actually looked like with the given descriptions in the book. So I ended up having to Google these creatures and try to see what other people who are like fans of the book, people who are, you know, artists who maybe did like artistic representations, artistic drawings, what they made these things look like. And what I realized really quickly is that the book does not describe these creatures really well, because when you look up certain creature names on Google, every artist has a different idea of what these things look like. For example, the creature, which they call the Naga in the book, it's supposed to be like a half snake, half human creature. And if you try to look that up in Google Images, every picture you see of it is so different. I couldn't mentally imagine what they looked like, which is why I ended up resorting to Google Images, and clearly nobody really knows what these things actually look like, because I don't feel like it was actually described well in the book. And that is my biggest downfall with this book. It's slow, the world building is slow, I don't feel like things are described really well. I guess it's left up to interpretation, but I don't want that much interpretation in my reading. Yeah, this one, super disappointing. I actually gave this first book a 2-star. The only saving grace was that it's somewhat flowed, but there were a lot of jump cuts throughout the book too, I'll be honest. I've heard through the grapevine, and by that I mean through Goodreads, that the rest of the books in this series are better than the first one, specifically the second book. A lot of people say the second book is like their favorite book, and I have started that book. I'll be honest, I'm about 50 pages in, and I am struggling just as much as I was with the first book. Like, I'm struggling through this one, you guys. If you have read this series, please tell me Does it get better? Should I continue? Especially if you were somebody that really didn't like the first book and continued reading, does it get better? But yeah, sorry to let all the Sarah J. Maas stands down. This series, or at least this book, not it. However, I want to wrap this video up by chatting about the other fantasy series that I read 4 books of. This one is called the Plated Prisoner series. This series is by an author named Raven Kennedy, and I fully enjoyed this series. I am waiting on pins and needles for that 5th book to be released because I binged through the first 4. While it's a fantasy series, I thought the world was built very quickly. It really pulled you into the storyline. You were really invested in the characters really quickly. It's a little raunchy from time to time. If I'm not mistaken, I think the first book in the series, which is called Guild, starts off really raunchy. So this series is about the main character. Her name is Oren. She is basically kept in a castle inside a giant cage to the king, who is King Midas. King Midas is known to have the power of gold touch, and Oren is his gold touched favored, as they call her. So Oren's skin is gold. She is plated and she's a prisoner, which is why this is called the Plated Prisoner series. But every book in this series, in my opinion, really expanded the storyline more and more. Personally, I didn't feel like there was a lot of dragging throughout this series. And for me, reading 4 whole books in this series, oftentimes there will be times throughout the story as it evolves where you just feel like things are dragging. This series kept it moving, in my opinion. Every part of these books, to me, was very entertaining. All the books are called different Goldie type names. So the first one is Guild, then you have Glint, Gleam, Glow, and the last one, which isn't out yet, is called Gold. I loved that these books kind of kept you on the edge of your seat. There were definitely cliffhangers at the ends of the books, which I didn't mind because there was another book to continue the story. And there were a lot of twists and turns, you guys. Every time the books ended, it kept you wanting the next one because you think you figured out the story and then something happens and you're like, wait, what? And then you think you figured out the story again and then again something else happens and you're like, wait, what? That was the way I felt throughout this series, you guys. It kept me engaged. It kept me excited. I was into it. I was into it the whole time. I fully, thoroughly, 100% enjoyed it. Alrighty guys, so those were all 8 of the books/series, you guys get me, that I wanted to chat about with you guys today. Based on these books that I read, please let me know in the comments below if you guys have any other recommendations for me, especially now that you have a little compilation knowing what I loved and didn't love about these specific books. If there are any other books that you think I would rate 5 stars, please leave them in the comments below. Like I said at the beginning of the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys being here so much, and I will chat with you guys in my next video very soon. I'll see you then. Bye.